Can the world actually function on Bitcoin? Spoiler, probably not. So, this is something that I know many people who are Bitcoin evangelists, Bitcoin fanatics like to talk about. They like to imagine, they like to theorize about, they like to consider what would happen if the world really did run on Bitcoin completely. What if our monetary system was supplanted by Bitcoin? And the general term for this is called hyper-Bitcoinization, which I think is silly, but it is what it is. So hyper-Bitcoinization essentially is the concept that all of the bad money is driven out by the good money. And the good money in this case is the only good money that exists in the world, which is Bitcoin, because it's superior in every possible way. That is essentially the TLDR of hyper-Bitcoinization. And people have different theories on how it'll happen and stages of growth, and we've seen some of that. So certainly hyper-Bitcoinization, I suppose, could happen, but I think the chance of it happening is relatively low. I don't think the world is really ready for that kind of leap forward, or if it even could be called a leap forward. But for a moment, for this video, I did kind of want to just pretend for a moment. So let's just pretend that hyper-Bitcoinization happened. Let's just pretend that everyone in the world uses Bitcoin. And let's pretend that the governments just decided to let this happen, and they're perfectly fine with Bitcoin taking over all of their national currencies. So what would happen? Could the world actually function on Bitcoin is the question. And so I suppose I will start. I think generally my answer is no, it couldn't function. And so I wanted to make a video on a few reasons why I think this probably couldn't happen, or this probably would not work, or at least it wouldn't be very efficient. So the very first question that I have is a very simple question that I don't think anyone really has a proper answer to. And the question is, if Bitcoin is the world's monetary system, how will offline payments work? Right. So even though we're moving to a cashless society and we're moving away from cash into debit cards, RFI, or what are they called, NFC chips, and these kind of technologies that allow us to do payments without any kind of paper money is still extremely useful for doing business pretty much at any time, at anywhere. You can be liquid with paper money. It can be dependable. You know the money is there. If something happens to Visa or MasterCard, like it has happened, I think Visa went down recently for a few hours or almost even a whole day. In one of those events, you actually have your paper money. Obviously, Bitcoin doesn't really have the problem of going down, but the point still remains. Even if Bitcoin is completely robust and it has 100% uptime, it's had 100% uptime since its inception. So there's no reason to think that would change. But certainly, there would still be a use for paper money for things. You would still want to use that in places maybe where you don't get a good internet signal, or you don't have physical keys that you can trade with to people, so on and so forth. And there are physical ways of trading Bitcoin between people. You can trade things like paper wallets and seeds and keys and things like that. But it's certainly not as easy, I would say, as trading dollars. Because if I have a paper wallet key and it is entitled to a certain amount of Bitcoin, I have to essentially match the amount of Bitcoin in there equal to the value of whatever it is I want to buy. And so it becomes difficult, because I can't divide my private key into a third and say, well, I only want to spend a third here. Money's different like that. If I have $30, chances are I have three $10 bills, so I can actually take a $10 bill and use that, and I don't have any problems. So that's really the first question that I haven't had anyone really answer to me yet, is if the Bitcoin is truly the world's monetary system, how will offline payments work? Secondly, I think Bitcoin is, at this point, I wouldn't say it's married to alts, but I certainly would say it is tied. The crypto ecosystem and Bitcoin, I would say, is almost one and the same thing. It's very, I would call it an amalgamation, or an amalgamation almost of both of these, of alts and Bitcoin. And so I think if Bitcoin succeeds, alts will almost certainly succeed along with it. And so you have to consider, if alts are a thing and you are a nation, like let's say the United States, wouldn't it behoove you to make one of your own alts, maybe put it on Ethereum and say, well, this is USD coin and you can trade USD coin and it's equivalent to $1. And yeah, it's better than Bitcoin because it's equivalent to $1. And you probably want to use that one instead of Bitcoin. Why would you want to use that instead of Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin is precious. Bitcoin, there's only 21 million of them. Bitcoin is valuable. The USD shitcoin, you probably just don't care about that one. So you actually could use that one you would prefer to use that one actually for your day-to-day. And so even then, I would say that this is more of a criticism of hyper-Bitcoinization. But certainly, if alts do succeed, it makes a lot of sense to me that there would be alts such as USD coin and KRW coin and Yuan coin and Euro coin, so on and so forth. These alts reasonably could and probably would in this fictional example work and function almost better than Bitcoin in that sense. So and then the other thing about this whole concept is, if the world is now on Bitcoin, if the world has truly hyper Bitcoinized, that means that everyone in the world now actually understands the value of Bitcoin. They all know what the value proposition is and they all believe in it. If everyone in the world believes in the proposition of Bitcoin, no one will spend it. We already have this HODL culture, this hold culture. Don't spend your Bitcoin, keep it, spend your USD, spend your alts, spend your whatever else, but just don't spend your Bitcoin because your Bitcoin is actually valuable. And while that is true, if the entire world thinks like that, no one will ever spend their Bitcoin. They would actually prefer, again, this goes back to the nation alts thing, they would prefer a nation alt or Ethereum or some other kind of alt that has less intrinsic inherent value than Bitcoin. So even in that case, I would say that if the entire world accepts the value of Bitcoin, they would never want to sell or use that Bitcoin, which means there would never be much Bitcoin on the market in the first place. It's kind of like gold, really, right? If you have a bunch of gold and a bunch of dollars, which one would you rather spend? You'd rather spend your dollars and keep the gold, right? Same thing with Bitcoin. So that's another criticism that I have. There's two more. The second to last one is the fact that Bitcoin, so right now we have the miners who are mining blocks and they're getting their block rewards. I believe block rewards right now are 12.5 Bitcoin per block, and that's going to get cut in half next year. But right now it's inflationary, and the inflation rate of Bitcoin I think is around 2 or 3% per year, and that's obviously going to get cut in half. But what will happen I think it's in 2140, when Bitcoin will run out of coins, when there's no more rewards, when that's it, all the miners have cashed out or received all of the Bitcoin rewards, there's no more Bitcoin left to mine, all 21 million have been mined, they're out in the wild, and that's it. Well, what happens at that point is you're going to get this deflationary thing. Bitcoin is going to become deflationary, and I actually think generally Bitcoin will actually become deflationary before that event, because around the very end, I would say the last 50 to 100 years or so of Bitcoin's life, there's really not going to be very many Bitcoin mined at all. And so the reason it's deflationary is people lose it, and people forget their keys, or people, maybe they die and they had a certain amount of keys or a certain amount of Bitcoin, and so those will never be accessed again. Obviously, we have the famous Satoshi wallets. The Satoshi wallets had something like 4 million Bitcoin in them, and so those Bitcoin can never be accessed. So I think the point will come much faster than 2140. It could be as soon as 2050, where the amount of people losing their keys and not being able to access their Bitcoin outpaces the amount of Bitcoin that is presently mined. And so that is the point where it will truly become deflationary, if we haven't already hit that point already. I don't think we've hit it just yet, though. But if that actually happens, Bitcoin all of a sudden becomes deflationary, and there's going to be less and less Bitcoin to go around. We already only have 21 million of them, and even though we can go back down to the sats, we can start trading fractions of Bitcoin with each other. Certainly, I think it's a problem with just the sheer number of Bitcoin. If we have 8 billion people in the world, it's not very many Satoshis for each of them. So even there, because it's deflationary, eventually it's going to be less and less Bitcoin that goes around, and so you simply cannot trade with it. You cannot really accumulate it because it's too hard to get. It's too hard to find. And so the deflationary aspect almost defeats it in a sense. I don't know if there's any world currency that has ever actually been deflationary. I think they've all been inflationary. And so if the world functions on this kind of inflationary currency, to be able to say that the world can move to this deflationary currency is rather strange. I mean, even gold is inflationary. We create gold, or we mine gold all the time, and certainly we have things like asteroids. Eventually, in the far future, where we can do asteroid mining and get a hell of a lot of gold from there. So even gold is inflationary. So in a way, Bitcoin is truly the most scarce resource in the universe, and because of that, you have to ask yourself: do I really want to spend my Bitcoin to buy, clothes at Tom Ford's or something? Probably not. The final point is credit and debt, and this has a little bit to do with the deflationary aspect of Bitcoin, but this is more to do with the economics of the world we live in today. Generally speaking, if you want to create a business, it's a lot better and easier for you to use someone else's money rather than your own, and someone else's money is usually in the form of banks. So you will take out a loan, you will get leveraged by 10 times or something. So you'll put in, let's say I want to buy a house. The house is $200,000. I will put in $20,000 or $40,000, let's say. Go 5x leverage, and the bank will give me the rest of the money, and then obviously I have to pay off that money. Now, that works fine in an inflationary system. If everyone else is doing it, then obviously we have things like fractional reserve. We have the use of debt as an instrument to create growth and stimulate growth and create new business models, ideas, new innovations, new technologies, and things like that at a much faster pace than we would be able to do if we only had the money that we have now. Imagine you yourself, if you are someone, or let's say Grant Cardone, right? Grant Cardone is someone who owns, I think he owns something like $300 million of houses. Most of that money is not his. So it would be impossible for him to create that kind of value if it wasn't for, sorry, I don't think it's houses. I think it's real estate, apartments and suites and things like that. But he wouldn't be able to create that if he didn't have the ability to use leverage and use debt in these things. And so you have to consider, first, would Bitcoin actually be an instrument with which anyone could leverage or use credit or debt on? If the entire world functioned on Bitcoin and everyone knew that there's only 21 million, we know that this is a deflationary currency at a certain point. It doesn't make sense for me to lend you $1 and expect $2 tomorrow when I know that there's only $1 in existence. The most that you can get me back is $1. So it's a losing bet for me, because all I can do is I can either, there's two cases: either I make my dollar back and I gained nothing, or your business venture fails and I don't get my dollar back. So I can only lose in that perspective. So why would I ever give you my money? So what the ramifications that this has on the greater economic system is that if the entire world functions on Bitcoin and no one wants to lend this thing out, then there can be no lenders. And that means that no business can be made, no growth can happen. It's a pretty bad time. We can't have things like these amazing skyscrapers that we have, and all of the amazing technology and all of the other things that we have today, because in large part due to the inflationary models of currencies. So that's really my main gripe with the whole hyper-Bitcoinization idea, is that people think Bitcoin is going to somehow solve the world's ailing problems and replace all of the world's currencies because it's the best, and that's not necessarily true. It's not even the best. I've already proved it in this video. It's not even the best if you want to build businesses on. It's not the best if you want to create a growing economy. It's not the best if you want to stimulate said economy. So those are my thoughts. Anyway, like this video. If you liked it, leave a comment. I want to know what you guys think. Could the world function on Bitcoin alone? Again, I don't think so. Not likely. But if you think otherwise, I'd be happy to hear why and how. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time.